Our next record, Angelo Badalamenti's Twin Peaks soundtrack that got a BNR on Saturday, a 9.0, reviewed by Seth Coulter-Walls. A little bit of background on that. Twin Peaks, massively influential TV series created by David Lynch and Mark Frost, originally ran from 1990 to 1991. Limited success at the time, but just developed an enormous cult following, now considered one of the greatest television series of all time. An accompanying film was created, Fire Walk With Me, that was also released, and a revival of the series is set to come out in 2017 on Showtime. Well, this is the first season's score, and it's received just as much acclaim as the show itself, and is generally considered one of the best soundtracks of all time. All the instrumentals composed by Badalamenti, and the three songs that include vocals by Julie Cruz, all those lyrics written by David Lynch. The Fire Walk With Me soundtrack, that's actually set to be reissued later this year by the same company who reissued this one, Death Waltz Recordings. Have you guys ever seen the show? You know the score?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched most of the shows we were talking about before we started recording. I know it's a little bit heresy, but there's that time when David Lynch sort of left the show in the middle of the second season, and it gets quite bad, and I got stuck. It's like I just need to finish.
It's a hurdle. It's a hurdle. For sure.
I mean, but yeah, I basically adore the show. It's like I don't even need to know how it ends. I mean, David Lynch movies, you don't even need to know how they end. Like, they don't really end anyway. It's just like that mood, that tone. It's like I adored what I watched, and of course this score adds so much. What about you, Darren? Have you ever watched the show?
No, I haven't watched the show. Of course, I've definitely heard of it. I've seen David Lynch films and stuff, so I've heard of this, but I've never just haven't really gotten around to watching the series.
I am a huge David Lynch stan, so I've seen the show multiple times. I've loved the soundtrack. I was super stoked when they announced that they were reissuing it, because original copies on vinyl just go for almost $200. And in fact, to talk about the reissue a little bit, at first I was a little upset they changed the cover art and stuff. Originally it was the classic shot from the show of the Twin Peaks sign, and this one they went with a super minimalist packaging. It's in a slip case that looks like the Black Lodge. It's like a gatefold thing. It ended up actually looking just super nice. Super happy with that. So I think that can add a little bit to the BNR there. It's worth picking up. But
isn't the disc coffee or something?
Yeah, they say it is. The color of it is a damn fine cup of coffee. And they even did little touches in the run out groove on each side. There's the quote from the show hidden in there. So they put a lot of effort into it, and I'm looking forward to the Fire Walk With Me soundtrack. But what were you guys' as a general impression with this record?
Well, so I mean, it's obviously very, it's so dreamy, and so, I mean, the tracks with vocals are almost like shoegaze songs, but really ambient, because the vocals are just buried, and
it gets ethereal.
Yeah, exactly. It's lush. I mean, you get lost in it. It's like you listen to the soundtrack all the time while you're watching the show. I mean, the soundtrack is always playing. It's kind of like those 80s movies where music is just always playing all the time. It kind of adds to the strange, unsettling, nightmare meets soap opera thing going on there. And the music just seeps into your skin, as you watch. It's I struggled all week to separate it from the show. I wanted to see how it stood up just as music, and it was so hard not to think of the show. Did you feel that way, Dan?
Yeah, I honestly wish I had heard this album before I had ever watched the show, because it would be nice to hear it that way. But yeah, it is kind of hard to separate from the show itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any I don't know, the main theme, the Twin Peaks theme is of course the most famous piece, and is amazing. I mean,
yeah, the piano on that is just so great.
Yeah, it's fabulous. But I don't know, what were some other highlights for you?
I mean, of course, like Laura Palmer's theme is just great.
Yeah.
Just the whole thing is so like cohesive, which I guess makes sense since it's a soundtrack. But the songs with lyrics are great too. Like Nightingale is just like the vocals are like almost cheesy, but again, it's that nightmare meets soap opera cheesy thing that like just Lynch is such a master of.
Yeah, and it's really amazing, and you know it's so weird because it's got like these kind of like cool jazz moments, you know, like
it really like flirts with just being super corny.
Yeah, it does. And in that respect, it reminds me kind of like Vaporwave to come much later, you know?
Yeah, actually, I didn't think of it that way, but some of it, a lot of times when it gets to those jazzy kind of things, I think it skirts that line.
Yeah, and it becomes like kind of a noir sound, you know, and it's like, it's like almost corny, but it's like this self-aware, like noir meets soap opera meets nightmare. I mean, I guess it's hard. We're just both struggling to describe. I mean, if anybody's tried to describe to a friend why David Lynch is amazing, I mean, that's no easy task, you know what I mean?
No, exactly. And I think, you know, Badalamenti, he did such a good job of capturing like David Lynch in this, because that whole nightmare meets the soap opera thing, you need something that like flirts with being corny but is still like you know, ethereal and off-putting and stuff, and he just did like such a perfect job. And I don't know how much Lynch helped him, you know, along with it, because you know, Lynch is like a musician himself and stuff, so you know, maybe he had a little bit of a hand in it, but regardless, I don't care who did it, it's amazing.
Yeah, well, what about you, Darren? You know, somebody who hadn't seen the show, you know, was the corniness just overwhelming?
I mean, no, you know, it's very rare to listen to a soundtrack, I think, before you have ever seen, whether it's a film, video game, or, you know, a television show, whatever it may be. But even going into it, knowing that it was a soundtrack for a David Lynch television series kind of already gave me some information as to what to expect. And I really feel like, you know, especially like the theme kind of was everything that I would expect, I guess, from a David Lynch production.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about like Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway, and, you know, I don't know. I kind of like the way you guys are saying, like, it's very difficult to like talk to somebody who doesn't know David Lynch and say, yeah, you really give them a good reason why they need to watch these things. I felt like I was right where, you know, it didn't feel like it was, I don't want to say like not that surprising in a bad way, but it was just like right kind of what I would have expected, I think.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was hoping like to see, you know, because I did, like I said, I struggled to decide for sure, you know, is this a great album without the series? And I was like, oh, maybe Darren can answer that question. But yeah, I mean, you're right. If you like know David Lynch at all, this is like, it's like you'll understand, I think, when you listen to this. But, you know, if we try our hardest, if this was just an album and there was no series, would it be like a classic album?
Yeah, I think definitely it is a great album on its own. It's one of the few soundtracks, really this one and Blade Runner are really the only ones that immediately jump to my mind that I just will like listen to, you know, on their own, not because I just watched the movie or something, you know, like I will just put this on and enjoy it. You know, a lot of things have like very famous soundtrack. Like you mentioned this off air, like Star Wars. Star Wars has a great soundtrack, an incredibly famous soundtrack, but no one rides around in their car listening to the Star Wars soundtrack, or even like really at home, you know, like I have it on vinyl, but it doesn't get played nearly as much as, you know, something like this that just holds up completely on its own.
Yeah, and it's quite, you know, it's deep. I mean, it rewards like deep listening. There are a lot of like fascinating sounds just like buried in there, and like it was so weird. I mean, I was listening in my house all week, and I would get like freaked out, like one of the characters on the show or something. Like I just feel like I heard things like down the hallway or something. I don't know. It's like it rewards deep listening. I think it would be like sort of a strange cult kind of album that would like, you know, maybe it really is like a big influence on the vaporwave genre, and I just never like thought about it and tried to make sense of that. But it would have some like sort of avant-garde like appeal as sort of like this lost, forgotten album. But because it's associated with what's considered one of the greatest shows of all time, it's considered one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. I think rightly so. Do you guys think that a 9.0 is too low?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, this soundtrack is just too great. To make a soundtrack that like plays like an album and it is listenable and is just completely would be a great album on its own. A 9.0 does a disservice. I honestly think it should be a straight 10.
I mean, I don't know. I have a hard time, kind of like way back when we were talking about the Terminator soundtrack. Would it be interesting if it was an album on its own without the television show? Perhaps, but I struggle to really try to say or try to think of like a world where this only exists on its own, because that would not happen. This is here. The soundtrack is here because of the television show. It's very important because of the television show, and I don't know. There would be a lot more that would have to go on in terms of like how it was released and who got to hear it when it was released for it to become like this cult hit. You know what I mean? Like, I think that the television show is what makes it important to listen to, or gets people interested in listening to it first before. You're not going to be like me. Most people are probably not going to be like me and say, oh, well, let's listen to the soundtrack first before I check out the show. That's just not going to happen. Right. So I don't know. I think the score is good. I like it. It seems like it is an important television show, obviously. Very important soundtrack. I'm all right with a 9.0.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's like, would it be a classic without the series? Doesn't fucking matter, because the series exists and it's the great soundtrack to a great series. So why try to separate it? But yeah, to me, it's just got to be a 10. It's like, it's my favorite soundtrack to listen to, period.
To hear the rest of our discussion, check out our website, metaforkmusic.com, or search us out on iTunes, Metafork Music.